April Leann Johnson was born on September 13, 1982. Unfortunately, during her teenage years, she began experimenting with drugs and would continue using on and off throughout the years. By the age of 37, she was the mother of a 13-year-old daughter living in Choctaw County, Alabama, which is located right across the Mississippi line. However, she spent most of her time hanging out in Mississippi, specifically Wayne County, where a majority of her family and friends lived. On January 12, 2020, April was arrested in Waynesboro, Mississippi, for disturbing the peace. She spent about 48 hours inside before being allowed to sign her own bond and was released at 8:30 a.m. on January 14th. After that, her family never heard from her again. According to them, she was released barefoot and in the same clothes she had on the day she was arrested, which consisted of a torn shirt. Apparently, a lot of jails release inmates with at least flip-flops if they don't have shoes, but I can't find that Wayne County does that. Unfortunately, there is zero surveillance footage of her walking away that day because it was overwritten before she was reported missing. Since she was known to fall out of touch, she wasn't reported missing until July 16, 2020, about 6 months later. Her family made the report with the Jackson Police Department in Jackson, Alabama. Her family and friends believe that after leaving, she was picked up by someone, but they have never been able to confirm who that person was. Considering Waynesboro has very limited transportation and Uber had only been rolled out nationwide a year earlier, she would have almost certainly had to have someone pick her up. But no one has ever come forward to admit that. There are some unconfirmed reports that she was seen back in Choctaw County that day. At the time of her disappearance, she was dating a man named Bruce Jacobs. 6 months after April disappeared in June 2020, Bruce went missing while in Oklahoma. On June 16, 2020, at around 8:15 a.m., Bruce left his campsite at Lake Arcadia in Edmond, Oklahoma. He was driving his red Ford pickup and had left his trailer behind. Less than 2 hours later, at 10 a.m., his truck was found abandoned on railroad tracks in Choctaw, Oklahoma, about 40 minutes away. Bruce was nowhere to be found and remains missing to this day. Interestingly, at the time, April still hadn't been reported missing. Friends and advocates have stated that local law enforcement did not conduct a thorough investigation from the outset, which has led many to believe the case was mishandled. Because of this, some people think something more serious may have happened to April. However, others believe she might have accidentally died and her body was disposed of. Sadly, her daughter had to grow up without her mother, but is now a mother herself with 2 children of her own. April Johnson stood 5 feet 5 inches, had short dark hair and blue eyes, and weighed approximately 135 pounds. She was known to change her hairstyle frequently, and about 3 months before she disappeared, she'd cut it short and dyed it a dark color. She went missing on January 14, 2020, and as of November 2025, she remains missing, and this case remains unsolved. Brandi Lauren White was born on January 30th, 1986, in Virginia Beach, Virginia. At the age of 37, she lived in the small town of Mount Olive, Mississippi, and was the mother of 2 children, a son and a daughter. She worked at a Fast Mart gas station in Collins and was described as having a big heart. She was also married to Michael White, but the two had separated. Before getting married, she'd unfortunately dealt with substance abuse, but had gotten herself clean. After the separation, she'd allegedly gotten back in the drug scene, or at the very least had rekindled old friendships with known meth users. Her father then gained custody of her 2 children. On August 20th, 2025, at approximately 3 a.m., Brandi was seen walking along William Warren Road, located near Highway 32 in the Mount Olive community of Covington County, Mississippi. She was with a male friend, whom I won't mention but will refer to as Friend A. He told the police and her family that while walking at a dump site, they saw some lights, got scared and took off running, but ran in different directions. When he came back to the car, she was nowhere to be found. He claims he even blew the horn and called her name, but nothing. He then left and called her father to inform him that he couldn't find Brandi. It's of note that friend A is allegedly known for selling drugs, stealing, collecting disability, hauling scrap metal, and getting money from his mother. Over the weekend, search teams combed the area where Brandi was last seen. Search dogs allegedly tracked her scent across William Warren Road to Horseshoe Road before it went cold. Interestingly, her makeup, which was still in a Ziploc bag from rehab, was found in the dump at the dump site. Brandi and friend A had been friends for 2 years. Interestingly, friend A's brother was found dead on his mother's property on Salem School Road in Collins, Mississippi. An autopsy by the Mississippi Crime Lab stated there were no physical injuries found to provide a cause of death. They were hoping a toxicology report would clear some things up, but that information hasn't been released to the public. Friend A was last seen around the Cherry Bridge area, and that's where a lot of the searches have taken place. He was allegedly seen parked beside the road with his trunk open in his mother's worn black Ford Fusion. A passerby said he appeared to be acting very strange. Weeks after she disappeared, that car went missing. Many suspect Brandi might have been put in the trunk following her assumed death. Even stranger is that he told people that he and Brandi were supposed to be going to Jones County, which is the same story he told people about his brother before being found dead on their mother's property. In the days leading up to Brandi's disappearance, she'd been bouncing around to different places. She'd stayed with one friend until she was made to leave. She was then known to have been with Jose Gomez Correa, who went by Paco. Paco reportedly dropped Brandi off at friend A's home on the Friday before her disappearance, instead of taking her to work. According to another friend of hers, whom we will call friend B, he said that he saw her in a shed, having unspeakable things done to her by friend A and a couple of his friends. That same night, screams were reported coming from friend A's home, followed by sounds of metal scraping and slamming. Other women came forward and reported similar incidents of being in the shed, tied up against their will, and having things done to them against their will. This has led some to wonder if Brandi threatened to report them and was murdered because of it. Maybe they went too far with her that night, and she accidentally died. There's also the possibility she overdosed on drugs. The night Brandi disappeared, friend A came out of his house to confront several men who were searching for her. When he stepped outside, an altercation occurred and he was attacked. His mom called the police, and they were gone before an officer arrived. Friend A then refused to press charges, saying that they were just concerned about Brandi and he understood that. Most people consider friend A to be the prime suspect, and his mother has gone to great lengths to defend him online. In mid-September 2025, she took to Facebook to claim that when Brandi showed up at her house, where friend A lived, she had no shoes, no extra clothes, and only a purse. She claimed she gave her flip-flops, but they broke, so she gave her an old pair of New Balance shoes. However, it was confirmed that she owned a new pair of Hoka shoes and was wearing them that day. Friend A and his mother then tried to say she didn't want to get them dirty, and that's why she put on oversized New Balance shoes. So which is it? Was she barefoot, or did she have on her Hoka shoes? It's almost certain she had her Hoka shoes because a tracking dog later found them in the woods, where she allegedly went missing. Brandi stood 5 feet 3 inches tall, weighed 130 pounds, and had brown hair and blue eyes. If you have any information about the disappearance of Brandi White, please call the Covington County Sheriff's Office at 601-765-8281. Brandi White went missing on August 20th, 2025, and as of November 2025, she remains missing, and this case remains unsolved. Jennifer Lynn Floyd, whose maiden name was Jackson, was born and raised in Tupelo, Mississippi. When she was 18, she married Lewis Lee Floyd and gave birth to a baby girl she named Rebecca Lynn. Their marriage quickly fell apart, and the following year they divorced. She and Rebecca then moved into a home on Chickasaw Trail in Tupelo. Jennifer was a carpenter who worked at Hancock Fabrics in the carpentry shop and dreamed of one day owning her own cabinet-making business. Sadly, she would never get the chance. On April 18, 1988, she got a phone call at work and left the store crying at around 9:30 a.m. After leaving, she was never heard from again. The next day, her stepfather found her car abandoned at the Mighty Mart on West Main Street in Tupelo. Unfortunately, Jennifer was nowhere to be found and was subsequently reported missing. After she went missing, her older sister, Sandra Jean Osborne, was granted guardianship of Rebecca. 2 years later, on October 30th, 1990, at around 4 a.m., Jennifer's father, 49-year-old J.P. Jackson, was shot to death as he tried to flee kidnappers. He'd been bound with air conditioner duct tape and placed in the back of his pickup truck, which was covered by a camper shell. He was eventually able to loosen the duct tape and bust out the window in the back of the camper shell with a hammer. He then opened the tailgate and jumped out, causing the driver to crash into a planter box at the home of Ann Jamison. This caused her to wake up and look out her window. As she did, she saw a man shoot JP to death in her front yard. She was later able to identify the man as 30-year-old Jimmy Edward Dunn, and he was arrested and charged with capital murder. Before JP's untimely death, he'd told friends that he believed a contract had been taken out on his life. He was a former Tippah County Justice Court judge, was an insurance agent for New York Life Insurance Company, and ran a small furniture manufacturing company in his hometown of Faulkner, Mississippi. However, the furniture business was suspiciously burned to the ground by arson. While they already had the shooter in custody, investigators were eventually able to point everything back to his wife and Jennifer's stepmother, Shirley Latch Jackson. She was also arrested and charged with capital murder, kidnapping, grand larceny, and conspiracy to commit murder in connection with her husband's death. Investigators weren't done yet, and would also charge 3 others with conspiracy to commit murder. Those individuals included Shirley's sister, 30-year-old Marilyn Huff, her husband, 41-year-old Don Huff, and Shirley's friend, 38-year-old Gary Meeks. Marilyn and Don were eventually granted immunity in exchange for their testimony against Meeks. In the end, Dunn was able to take a plea deal that only had him pleading guilty to kidnapping charges and was sentenced to 25 years in prison. As for Shirley, she was sentenced to life in prison for the kidnapping and burglary charges. While investigators could never find a connection between JP's murder and Jennifer's disappearance, that didn't stop rumors from swirling about her possible involvement in both cases. Rumors also pointed to her ex-husband being involved because he allegedly once said that he would kill her before ever giving her a divorce. However, he was given a lie detector test and was subsequently eliminated as a suspect. If you have any information about the disappearance of Jennifer Lynn Floyd, please call the Tupelo Police Department at 662-841-6546. Jennifer went missing on April 18, 1988, and as of November 2025, she remains missing, and this case remains unsolved. Kenneth Charles Davies was born on August 30th, 1952, to Ridge and Bertie Davies, and went by the nickname Kim, K-I-M. He was described as an honest and dependable, doting father of 4 adult children, and was called Pop by his several grandchildren. By the age of 62, he and his wife of 30 years, Mary Lou Davies, were living in the small, rural town of Black Hawk, Mississippi, where they ran their family-owned grocery store called K&M Grocery, which they co-owned. They'd also co-owned the K&M farm for the past 23 years. When he wasn't working side by side with Mary at the grocery store, he worked at the Winona stockyard. On the night of July 29, 2015, Kim and Mary were working together behind the grocery store's counter, as they had done for the past 25 years. At some point, Mary left, leaving Kim to work the store alone. About 30 minutes after closing at 9:30 p.m., a customer who assumed the store was still open walked in and found Kim shot to death behind the counter. Mary's neighbor heard the news and quickly informed her of the situation. Investigators determined that Kim had been shot with a large caliber handgun. Unfortunately, police were left baffled as to a motive since the large amount of money that Kim kept on him and the money in the register remained untouched. Was the shooting or robbery gone wrong, and the suspect fled before grabbing the money, or did someone have it out for Kim? He was known around town as a very quiet and kind-hearted man, which makes the target theory seem less plausible. If you have information about the murder of Kenneth Charles Davies, please call Sheriff Clint Walker at 662-310-7233 or the Carroll County Sheriff's Office at 662-237-9283. Kim was found murdered on July 29, 2015, and as of November 2025, this case remains unsolved. Tammyetta Michelle Spaulding was born on January 6, 1979, and grew up in Moss Point, Mississippi. She enjoyed playing cards, shopping, going out to eat, and dancing. At the age of 32, she had a heart attack and had 2 stents put in. Tammy also had diabetes, was insulin dependent, and suffered from heart failure, but it never slowed her down. In 2016, Tammy, who is now 37, was living in Jackson, Mississippi, and was very close to her 2 young daughters, ages 7 and 12. This was a big year for her, as she'd received a raise at her Comcast job and was possibly up for a promotion, and she and her daughters were about to move into a Habitat for Humanity home that had been built for them. Unfortunately, on Friday, September 2, 2016, the start of Labor Day weekend, Tammy's life took a sudden turn. That morning, Tammy dropped her daughters off at school and went to work at Comcast. Then, for some unknown reason, she left work early. Later that afternoon, she was seen at Easy Money, a payday lending office on Ellis Avenue. The following day, September 3rd, Tammy called and spoke with her father, James Spaulding. Before hanging up, she said she would call later, but sadly never did. After that, she was never seen or heard from again, and her father is the last known person to have spoken with her. Phone records later showed that someone used her cell phone for a couple of days after she disappeared, but investigators were unable to trace those calls. On September 5th, 2 days after Tammy was last seen, her blue 2013 Chevy Equinox was found abandoned behind a gas station on Savannah Street near Interstate 55. There were no keys, no phone, and no sign of Tammy. Investigators found that the car had been cleaned so thoroughly that they couldn't even find Tammy's own fingerprints inside. Because of this, investigators began to suspect foul play. Investigators later received a tip from a local woman who told them they were wasting their time searching because she claimed that Tammy's body would never be found. The woman went on to say that acid had been used to destroy evidence and that a red truck was involved in disposing what was left. Interestingly, Tammy's ex-boyfriend was known to drive a red truck, which matched the description in the tip. Tammy's family believes she may have been involved in a love triangle. She'd recently been pregnant, but suffered a miscarriage, and around that same time, she found out that her ex-boyfriend was seeing another woman who was 3 months pregnant. Unfortunately, they only knew the man's first name, which they believed was Marcus. The man was later located and allegedly cleared of involvement. After Tammy disappeared, her parents took over raising her daughters. As time passed, it became harder for the family to hold on to hope. The investigation stalled, with no new leads, no remains found, and no answers for her family. On the day she went missing, Tammy was last seen wearing a brown sweater dress, and her hair was cut short and dyed blonde. She wore eyeglasses with black plastic frames. If you have information about the disappearance of Tammyetta Michelle Spaulding, please call the Jackson Police Department at 601-960-1234. Tammy went missing on Saturday, September 3, 2016, and as of November 2025, she remains missing, and this case remains unsolved.